Picture this. You walk into Hermes knowing exactly what you want. A Birkin. You have the money and you're ready to buy. But somehow, that's not the transaction that happens. Instead, you buy a scarf, maybe shoes, maybe jewelry, maybe something for your home. Not because those were the things you came for, but because you believe buying them might move you closer to the thing you actually wanted. But why would you believe that? Maybe you keep shopping. Maybe you spend thousands of dollars. And even then, you might leave without the bag. It sounds like luxury shopping folklore. Except allegations about this exact kind of experience ended up in federal court. Which raises a much stranger question. When you shop for a Birkin, what are you actually buying? A handbag? Or access? Before there was a lawsuit, there was already a vocabulary. And if you've spent any time around the world of Hermes collecting, you've probably heard some of it. Purchase history. Building a relationship with your sales associate. Getting offered a bag. Online, shoppers compare purchase histories, sales associate relationships, boutique strategies, and what they believe help them receive an offer. The basic idea goes something like this. A Birkin isn't necessarily something you simply select from a shelf. You shop with a brand. You build a relationship. You wait. And eventually, maybe, you're offered the bag you actually wanted. But this is where we have to be careful. Customer culture is not the same thing as official Hermes policy. Hermes has never published some formula that says, spend this much, buy these categories, and then you'll receive a Birkin. There is no official pre-spin number that guarantees you a bag. And apparently, sometimes it helps to know Lisa Rinna. If you watched The Traders last season, you know exactly where I'm going with this. After Rob Roche revealed himself as a traitor and walked away with the entire prize pot, he had one very specific apology to make to Maura Higgins. He'd broken their pinky promise. So he bought her a Birkin. Not just any Birkin, either. A burgundy Togo Birkin 30 with gold hardware, reportedly worth around $16,000. But here's the part that feels almost too perfect for this episode. Lisa Rinna helped him find it, and the bag was ultimately sourced through a luxury reseller. So even with more than $200,000 in prize money, getting the exact Birkin still involved knowing someone who could help him find it, which is basically the theme of this entire dossier accidentally playing out on reality television. Anyway, back to Hermes. What exists instead is something much harder to pin down. Thousands of individual shopping experiences, stories, strategies, patterns people compare until, from the outside, they begin to look like a system. So maybe the interesting question isn't simply whether the game exists. It's how an unofficial culture can start to feel almost as rigid as a written rule. And in 2024, that question became much more serious. Because customers didn't just complain about it online. They sued Hermes. In March of 2024, Hermes customers in California filed a federal lawsuit. Their allegation was specific. They claimed access to Birkin bags was effectively tied to purchases of other Hermes merchandise. Scarves, shoes, jewelry, ready-to-wear, home goods. Products the lawsuit described as ancillary to the bag itself. According to the plaintiffs, buying those other items could become part of the path toward eventually being offered a Birkin. The complaint also focused on the way sales associates were allegedly compensated. The plaintiffs argued that associates could earn commissions on certain other Hermes products while Birkin purchases were treated differently. According to their theory, that could create a strange incentive. An associate could earn commissions selling a customer other products while the thing that customer originally came for remained out of reach. That was the picture the lawsuit painted. But allegations are not findings. And turning that picture into an actual antitrust violation was going to be much harder, because now lawyers had to answer a bizarre question. How does shopping for a handbag become a federal competition case? The plaintiff's theory centered on something called tying. The simple version goes like this. You want product A. The seller says, fine, but to get product A, you also have to buy product B. Under certain circumstances, that kind of arrangement can become an antitrust problem. The plaintiffs argued that the Birkin was product A, and the other Hermes merchandise was product B. In their view, Birkin access was being used to drive purchases of product customers might not otherwise have bought. It was an interesting theory. There was just one problem. They still had to show that what they were describing actually fit antitrust law. And Hermes said it didn't. Hermes denied requiring customers to purchase other products before purchasing a Birkin or Kelly bag. Its legal position was also broader than that. Hermes argued that the plaintiffs had not plausibly described the kind of illegal tying arrangement antitrust law is designed to prevent. In other words, a luxury product being scarce and customers being frustrated that they can't easily get it doesn't automatically mean there is an illegal scheme. Two very different descriptions of what was happening around the same famous handbag. So what did the court actually decide? This is where the story takes another turn. Because Hermes won, but not necessarily for the reason you might think. In September of 2025, U.S. District Judge James Donato dismissed the plaintiffs' federal claims with prejudice. The plaintiffs had already been given opportunities to revise their case. The court concluded that the newest complaint still had fundamental problems. But the ruling is important to understand correctly. The court was not deciding whether every shopping experience described by the plaintiffs did or did not happen. It was deciding whether the allegations, as pleaded, amounted to a viable federal antitrust case. And Judge Donato concluded they did not. Among the problems, the plaintiffs had not plausibly established the relevant product markets. They had not adequately shown that Hermes possessed the kind of market power their theories required. And they had not shown the kind of injury to competition that antitrust law is actually meant to address. That last distinction matters. Antitrust law is designed to protect competition. It isn't simply a law against frustrating shopping experiences. And the court made another important point. Even if Hermes favors customers who spend more money with the brand, that fact by itself does not automatically create an antitrust violation. That's a much narrower conclusion than saying every allegation about Birkin's shopping culture was proven false. The federal antitrust case failed. The plaintiffs appealed. And as of this episode's publication, that appeal remains pending. So legally, this story still has another chapter. But honestly, the courtroom may not be the most interesting part of it. Because once you step away from the legal filings, you're left with a much bigger question. Why would making something harder to buy ever make it feel more valuable? Imagine two stores. Store number one has 50 luxury handbags lined up behind glass. Every color, every configuration. You walk in. Choose one, swipe your card, and leave 10 minutes later. Now imagine store number two. You don't know exactly what's available. You don't know what's in the back. You develop a relationship with the person behind the counter. You come back. You wait. You wonder. And then, one day, your sales associate says, I have something I'd like to show you. Here's the strange part. The bag in store one and the bag in store two could be physically identical. Same leather. Same stitching. Same silhouette. But psychologically, they don't feel like the same object. In store one, you're a customer completing a purchase. In store two, you were chosen. And that distinction, being chosen instead of simply being able to pay, changes what the object can represent. The Birkin isn't merely expensive. Plenty of things are expensive. What makes this story more interesting is that money alone doesn't necessarily remove every obstacle between the customer and the object. And once access becomes uncertain, access itself can start to feel valuable. Almost every other part of modern commerce is trying to make buying easier. One-click checkout, same-day delivery, instant confirmation. Buy now, remove friction. Get the product into the customer's hands as quickly as possible. Luxury can sometimes operate very differently. Waiting, uncertainty, scarcity. A sales associate who has to check what's available. A buying process where having the money doesn't necessarily guarantee the outcome. It sounds like terrible retail. Frustrating, inefficient, exactly the kind of experience that should send a customer somewhere else. Unless difficulty is part of what makes the experience feel different. Because if anyone with enough money can walk in and immediately walk out with the object communicates something simple. You could afford it, but when the process is uncertain, when access feels selective, the experience can communicate something else. You didn't just buy it. You gained access to it. And those are two very different stories to tell about the exact same handbag. There's an important distinction here. Scarcity does not automatically mean manipulation. A Birkin is a highly crafted physical object. Production is finite. Demand is enormous. And when more people want something than can immediately be supplied, difficult access can exist without some elaborate conspiracy behind it. That matters. So does this. The lawsuit did not establish a formal prerequisite purchase system as fact. The plaintiffs alleged one. Hermes denied requiring those purchases, and the federal antitrust claims were dismissed before those allegations were ever proven through a trial verdict. So we shouldn't take customer anecdotes and quietly turn them into official company policy. But there's another side to that. The culture exists whether there is a secret rulebook or not. Customers discuss purchase history. They compare boutiques. They talk about sales associates. They debate what supposedly increases their chances of receiving an offer. Entire online communities have grown around trying to understand how access works. And every conversation adds another layer of mystery around an object that was already difficult to obtain. Which leads to one of the strangest parts of this story. Nobody needs to deliberately design a game for people to start playing one. There's a reason this story felt like the natural next facet after Rolex. Rolex showed us one version of luxury access. You can have the money and still wait for the watch. The Birkin takes that idea somewhere stranger. Customers have alleged that the path toward the object they wanted involved spending money on things they didn't originally come to buy. Different stories, different systems, but the same uncomfortable idea keeps appearing underneath both. Money can get you in the room. It doesn't necessarily guarantee you the object. So let's go back to the question we started with. What are you actually buying when you buy a Birkin? There's the physical bag, obviously. The leather, the craftsmanship, the design. But then there's everything surrounding it. Price tells us who can afford something. Access tells us who gets to have it. And when those two things become separated, something strange happens to the transaction. It stops feeling like a purchase. It starts feeling like admission. Perhaps that's the strangest luxury of all. Not owning something expensive, but being allowed to buy it. If you enjoy looking beyond the surface of wealth, luxury, and the things we're taught to desire, subscribe to the Faceted Dossier. There are a lot more stories to uncover, because access isn't the only way luxury creates desire. Sometimes the question isn't whether there are enough products to go around. Sometimes the company itself has spent decades deciding exactly what kind of customer gets access to its most desirable machines. Who gets invited? Who gets priority? Who gets told no? And few brands have built more mythology around that relationship than Ferrari. That's the next facet of the Faceted Dossier.